Often, the emotional attachments we carry don't stem from love or a healthy connection, but from an internal struggle against what we refuse to accept: loss, emptiness, or even parts of ourselves that we project onto others. The question is, why do these often painful bonds hold us captive? Emotional attachment, within the framework of analytical psychology, isn't merely a matter of feelings. It reflects unconscious patterns, archetypes, and aspects of our shadow that have yet to be integrated. Jung teaches us that the key to breaking free from such ties isn't to resist or suppress our emotions, but to understand and transform them. It's through this process that we find freedom and true individuation. In this video, we'll explore 5 fundamental lessons inspired by Carl Jung's theories to help break free from the prison of emotional attachment. We'll look at how shadow integration, connecting with the self, and tapping into the collective unconscious can serve as powerful tools to face these challenges. Now, imagine each lesson as a step toward untangling the knots that bind us. A journey to emotional freedom, where what once felt unbearable transforms into learning and growth. Lesson 1. Recognize the unconscious patterns behind attachment. Carl Jung described the unconscious as a vast reservoir of memories, experiences, and emotions that shape our lives without our awareness. He believed emotional attachment often arises from projections. We attribute qualities to others that are, in truth, unacknowledged parts of ourselves. For instance, when we idealize someone, we project onto them our desires and the aspects of ourselves we deny or overlook. Jung argued that projection creates a false connection, tying us to an idea of the person rather than their reality. To overcome emotional attachment, the first step is to identify these unconscious patterns. Ask yourself, what am I projecting? Does this person represent a need I'm not fulfilling within myself? Lesson 2. Confront the shadow revealed by attachment. Emotional attachment offers a chance to face the shadow, what Jung defined as the collection of traits and impulses we repress because they seem undesirable or inappropriate. These attachments often expose hidden insecurities, fears, and unmet needs. For example, if you feel like you can't live without someone, it might reflect a fear of loneliness or a struggle to face your own internal emptiness. Facing the shadow means acknowledging these uncomfortable truths. Instead of rejecting them, embrace them as part of your being. Jung believed that true freedom comes from integrating the shadow, as it then ceases to control us unconsciously. Lesson 3. Understand the role of archetypes in your attachment. Archetypes, universal images, and patterns within the collective unconscious also shape our relationships. The lover archetype, for instance, might lead us to romanticize love as a transcendent force, driving us to cling desperately to the idea of fulfillment through another person. Recognizing these archetypes is crucial for breaking emotional bonds. Ask yourself, is my attachment influenced by an idealized view of love or a need for validation? By becoming aware of how archetypes shape your feelings, you begin to reclaim power over your choices. The initial work to overcome emotional attachment begins with this deep exploration of the unconscious. As Jung emphasized, consciousness is the only effective antidote to the blind force of the unconscious. Imagine Clara, a young woman who feels an almost unbearable attachment to her partner, Lucas. Despite countless incompatibilities, she can't seem to let him go. Reflecting on her emotions, Clara realizes she idealizes Lucas as someone strong, secure, and confident, qualities she feels are missing in her own life. By seeking these traits in him, she neglects the opportunity to develop her own self-confidence. Here, Jung's concept of projection becomes evident. Clara isn't attached to Lucas as he truly is, but to the idea she has projected onto him. Once she becomes aware of this, she begins working on herself, building her own sense of security and autonomy. As a result, the relationship loses its weight of emotional dependency and transforms into something more balanced or, in some cases, no longer makes sense at all. Take Joe, for instance. After a breakup, he experiences deep anguish. He realizes his pain isn't just about losing his partner, but about the loneliness the relationship had been masking. Exploring his shadow, Joe uncovers a profound fear of rejection, which had led him to avoid conflict and always prioritize his partner's needs over his own. Through reflection and self-awareness, Joe starts to embrace his vulnerability. He understands that the fear of rejection is a universal part of the human experience and doesn't have to define him. This acceptance weakens his emotional attachment and paves the way for healthier future connections. Then there's Sophia, who has always sought partners who embody the hero archetype, someone who could save her from her own challenges. Studying archetypes and reflecting on her choices, Sophia realizes she's been living under the influence of the damsel archetype, waiting to be rescued instead of confronting her struggles. Armed with this insight, she decides to rewrite her story, connecting instead with the archetype of the heroine, symbolizing strength and independence. Gradually, Sophia learns to trust herself and form relationships based on mutual support rather than dependency. These examples show how Jung's theories can be applied to everyday life. By understanding the hidden patterns behind our attachments, we take an important step toward emotional freedom. Carl Jung once said, "Healing is only possible when we are willing to confront the wound." Overcoming emotional attachment requires facing the pain it causes rather than running from it. In this context, pain isn't just a burden, but a guide. It reveals the areas where we're entangled in illusions, fears, and unmet needs. When we avoid pain, we perpetuate the cycle of attachment. Jung believed that confronting suffering initiates the alchemical transformation of nigredo, the initial darkness that precedes illumination. In this stage, we learn to see attachment for what it truly is, a way of filling an inner void that can only be resolved through personal growth. For instance, when faced with the sadness of loss, we can ask, what exactly am I losing? Is it the presence of the other person, or what they represented to me? Such questions connect us to the self, the core of our psyche, where our strength and wholeness reside. Lesson 5. Connect with the self and the collective unconscious. Jung said that the goal of life isn't happiness, but the realization of wholeness. This means integrating all aspects of ourselves, including those we project onto others. The self, for Jung, represents this wholeness. When we seek in others what we lack, we lose our connection to our own self. Overcoming emotional attachment is, ultimately, a journey back to the self. This process also links us to the collective unconscious, reminding us that by freeing ourselves from individual bonds, we become aware of being part of something greater. The pain of emotional attachment is universal, shared by all humans at different times. This perspective helps us feel less isolated and find meaning in suffering. When we reconnect with the self, we realize that wholeness doesn't depend on external factors. The lessons of attachment teach us that by integrating our fragmented parts, we become whole. And in this wholeness lies true emotional freedom, one that doesn't rely on another person or external circumstances. By applying these lessons, we begin to see emotional attachments not as enemies, but as teachers. They are invitations to grow and transform. Carl Jung showed us that the hardest emotional challenges, like overcoming an attachment, are unique opportunities for growth. He once said, "There is no awakening of consciousness without pain." By confronting our wounds, shadows, and projections, we discover that the true power to set ourselves free lies within. Overcoming an emotional attachment isn't about abruptly forgetting or detaching. It's about integrating the lessons it brings. It's recognizing that, no matter how meaningful a connection with someone was, it doesn't define who we are. Each lesson draws us closer to our center, to the self, enabling us to build relationships rooted in authenticity rather than neediness. Remember, emotional freedom is a process. It involves accepting that emptiness and pain are part of the journey, but don't have to be permanent. Every tear shed can water the soil of inner growth. Every step toward self-awareness brings us closer to emotional independence and peace. Jung also teaches us to value human interconnectedness. The pain of attachment isn't something we face alone. It's a reflection of a universal experience, shared within the collective unconscious. Recognizing that we're not alone provides strength through shared understanding and mutual support. The final message is clear. Emotional attachment isn't a life sentence, it's an invitation. An invitation to dive deep into our being, confront our fears, and rediscover our essence. By overcoming attachment, we don't just free ourselves from someone else, we move closer to who we truly are. So, the next time you feel bound by an emotional connection, remember that there's a greater purpose behind it. Jung would say these challenges are essential parts of individuation, the journey to becoming whole. Embrace the path, face the pain, and celebrate each small step forward. Because in the end, overcoming an emotional attachment isn't just about breaking free from someone. It's about freeing yourself to become who you were born to be.